Salutations to the nations. What's good, Angel Knots? It's your boy Young Side 9. Today, you are chilling with me while I am chilling in this parka that my wife got me. You feel me? Feeling cozy than a mug. Angel Knot. But today, we going to be doing a reaction on why gaming still isn't respected. All right, let's go ahead and check this out.
Nowadays, the video game industry is bigger than Hollywood, it's bigger than the music industry, and it still gets no respect.
My first issue with video games is that I believe that as a rule, it is a massive waste of your time.
I think video games are for children.
I don't know if that game expands your understanding or your ability to contribute to the larger conversation.
Go outside, get some fresh air. Beating Tetris is not a life goal.
Hey, yo.
I'm going to be honest.
That lady.
I thought I would find a lot more instances of people giving.
That lady right there. Do you know what that clip is from? That is when a young boy beat Tetris on the NES. I believe it was the NES for the first time in history. He got it to I think it's called the dead screen. And this lady came on live air straight hating on dude. And he had even dedicated his win to his dad who passed. And she just came pooping over his accomplishment. Like, go outside and get some fresh air. That's like a common thing with people, that they say to people who game. But this lady specifically, this lady right here, yo, that was straight diabolical work for real.
Is of people giving video games the middle finger, but what you just saw is just about all I could find. And initially, I thought this meant that making this video would just be an overreaction and that people today truly didn't feel this way about video games. And it turns out most people don't, but just because the majority of people don't have extreme opinions on video games doesn't mean they aren't disrespecting them and making gamers feel like outsiders. In fact, I think the current popularity and success of
video games remain America's favorite pastime, with more than 212 million Americans playing regularly. I always say it, even if somebody thinks they're not a gamer, they're probably still a gamer and don't classify themselves as such, especially because of mobile gaming. For instance, I know my wife, she doesn't consider herself a gamer per se, but it was a point in time where she was playing a lot of Wordly on her phone. I have family members who play, what is it? What is it called? What? Candy Crush. There you go. Candy Crush. That's a video game, So you might not be holding a joystick per se, sitting down playing a console, but if you're playing games on your mobile device, you're still a gamer.
Success of video games has almost made gamers feel like we're not allowed to feel like social outcasts. And while I'm very grateful for all the great games we have, I can't just ignore that something's still off. Gaming is not a normalized hobby. Let me show you what I mean. I want you to imagine you bust up into a stranger's house because you want to make some new friends. But upon entering their house, you don't immediately notice anything that gives off those gamer vibes we all know and love. With that in mind, would the first question you ask them be, what video games do you play? No, because they'd most likely just say, I don't play video games. Then the conversation would become awkward, which would make your social anxiety kick in, prompting you to run away in order to compose yourself before coming back to apologize and ask what their favorite movie or song is, because everybody watches movies and listens to music. They probably aren't watching the Game Awards though, because it's targeted towards gamers. And yet, despite that fact, it almost feels like the Game Awards doesn't want to be associated with the stigma around video games.
It feels like the people who make the video games don't matter enough, or are not cool enough, or are not Hollywood enough to present the awards.
I, along with Alana, don't think the Game Awards are all bad, but as she alluded to, some priorities definitely need to shift if we are to believe this is truly a show meant to celebrate.
I don't be tuning into the Game Awards like that. Excuse me. Am I tripping? Am I tripping for not tuning into the Game Awards? I look and see who won certain things sometimes, maybe, but I don't be tuning in like that. Should I start tuning in? Let me know.
video games and their devs.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna wrap it up apparently.
And not just one giant ad where traditional celebrities can just goof off.
Pew, pew, pew.
I mean, why do these traditional celebrities get to be in gaming ads when, to my knowledge, gaming influencers don't advertise anything outside?
Yo, Aaron Paul can be in anything, okay? After Breaking Bad, I don't care if he's in the Gamer Awards. I don't care if he's on a Doritos commercial. I don't care if he's on The Price is Right. Oh, it's funny because I was trying to make a joke, but he really was on The Price is Right. Go check it out. Wow, I was just trying to make a joke, but didn't know I was going there. Okay, I'm spitting facts today, y'all.
Anything outside of gaming. Why can't a good game speak for itself like some movies often do, since those movies are why the actors are famous in the first place? Probably for the same reason the very platform that hosts these gaming influencers treats them differently than regular influencers. In fact, MatPat, creator of the Theorist channels, actually interviewed former YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki about this very issue at the 2019 Gaming Creators Summit.
There's all sorts of stuff out there that feels like gaming is kind of a second thought. We're relegated to our own platform with YouTube Gaming, our own app, our own social media handle, our own trending tab. It feels like we're being segregated off from the rest of YouTube, even though we're delivering a huge value to this platform.
Not only does a fat chunk of YouTube's views come from gamers, but so does the largest chunk of revenue in the entertainment industry. So what's the deal? Why does gaming seem to have the same social stigma attached to it that it's had ever since its early days, and more importantly, can we even do anything about it? Well, just
Grown men shouldn't be wasting their lives playing video games. The only adults who still use the word playtime aren't the types to be found on the tube. They're busy riding around outside on e-scooters. I have lots of thoughts about that, okay? First off, I don't really know anybody who uses the word playtime. No, I can't really think of that. Second off, let's not get it twisted. Playing games too much, even though I play a lot of games, obviously, can be a waste of time, okay? But let's put some things into perspective, okay? Because what I'm saying is a loaded statement. For starters, I want to say that I am a Christian, okay? If you don't like that, you can, click off, whatever. But the Bible does talk about our days being numbered and being aware of time, okay? But with that being said, one of the things I want to say is if you're spending all of your time playing video games and you're not taking care of your responsibilities, you have a family, you have a husband or a wife or children or responsibilities in your life, and you are an adult, even if you're not an adult, if you're a child who's in school and you're not taking care of your schoolwork, but all you're doing is playing video games, then yes, you are wasting your time. Also, if you are playing games that you don't even necessarily like, but you're doing things just to pass the time, or you are playing games just because it's trendy, but it might not even be a game that you necessarily care about, you're also wasting time. But let's not get it twisted, okay? Video games is not the only waste of time. People waste their time doing numerous things. People waste their time scrolling down social media, a death scroll. And to be honest, if I'm going to use my time, I would prefer using my time doing something. That's not my time, it's God's time. I'm going to fulfill that time doing something I actually enjoy, okay? I actually enjoy video games. I would rather be spending time doing that than just scrolling down Facebook. Whenever I'm just scrolling down Facebook or social media, then I feel like, oh my gosh, what did I do with my time? But when I'm playing games, I don't feel like that because I actually enjoy it. Also, I want to say they're busy riding around on e-scooters. E-scooters are dope, okay? E-scooters are super dope. All right, keep going.
Why does gaming seem to have the same social stigma attached to it that it's had ever since its early days? And more importantly, can we even do anything about it? Well, just like trying to convince yourself you should cook dinner at home instead of going to Taco Bell, It's complicated. What you need to understand first, though, is that it all started with a little thing called generational myopia. In his article about why the mainstream media
If you know what myopia means, put it in the comments. I don't. So teach your boy.
struggles to cover video games, Ben Lindbergh states, largely because of what former Times writer Seth Shachel calls generational myopia.
Days are evil. That's the scripture. That's the Bible scripture I was trying to think of where it's talking about time. It says that, you know, we should know that the days are evil, meaning our time here is limited.
Calls generational myopia. The keepers of the cultural sections
At least that's my interpretation of that scripture.
aren't convinced that gaming merits a spot on the masthead alongside longer-lived entertainment cornerstones. Later in the article, Brian Crescente mentions that a lot of these publications are run by people who probably didn't grow up playing video games. This, of course, implies that they don't seem to understand them. I think actor and comedian Brian Callen puts it best.
For older people, it's subversive. We don't trust it, we don't like it, we don't understand it, and it scares us a little bit because it's also reminds us of our own mortality.
We're also brainwashed to thinking the video games are for losers.
All of that.
What's interesting about Brian here, not to be confused with Brian Crescente, is that he actually did come from the first generation to grow up with video games. So the only logical conclusion is that Brian probably didn't get to play video games as a kid because his parents likely had a negative perspective on them, which then influenced Callen, just like the media does with the rest of the US. The only problem is, this line of thinking is flawed. By that logic, all millennials, Gen Z, and even Gen Alpha would think this way about video games too. This mindset would just get passed down to each subsequent.
Yo, my dad, rest in peace, he was 65 when he passed. He loved video games, okay? So this isn't just an age thing. My dad loved games. That's why I'm a gamer. I remember as a kid, me and my mom playing his Sega Master System and breaking it when he was at work. I don't know how we broke it, but when he passed away, I inherited a lot of his game collection, which I will show at some point on this channel. But so it's not just an age thing. Yo, low key, that second dude, this dude right here, they kind of look like my dad.
Passed down to each subsequent generation. In case it wasn't clear, I obviously have no idea what Brian's dad thinks of video games, but my dad is from Gen X just like Callen, yet he doesn't think the same way about video games as Callen does. You also have millennials like Mandy B, who you saw in a clip earlier in the video. And when discussing who she would or wouldn't date on her podcast, she said,
I would rather you have a hobby that's not video games. Something that
Why? Why do you care? Why do you care what somebody's hobby is if it's not hurting anybody?
grows you, enlightens you.
and I'd be willing to bet
Video games do grow you and they do enlighten you depending on the game that you're playing. There are so many puzzle games that teach you strategy. There are so many games that have storylines in them that enlighten you or just help you see things different. I hate when people say that video games cannot help you improve as a person and they elevate other hobbies over them, like reading fictional books. That's what I'm referring to, not just reading nonfiction books, but reading fictional books, when video games can literally incorporate reading into the medium.
this way too. So while this mindset started with the older generation thanks to the infamous video game crash of 1983, we actually have video game publishers to thank for providing the perfect place for this social stigma around video games to take center stage. You see, one of the biggest reasons the crash happened in the first place was because of the oversaturation of the market and thus a loss of consumer confidence in garbage like this. Because of this, video
E.T. on the Atari 2600. I used to have that game. The first time I played it, I didn't even realize that it was the worst game of all time. When I played that game, tears were pouring down my eyes as to how horrible that game was. I was cracking up laughing. I could not stop. Oh my gosh.
games were seen as a fad and lost any momentum they might have had to make it as a normalized hobby among the likes of TV and music.
That's one of the worst aging statements ever.
And Nintendo put the nail in the coffin when they pulled the Trojan horse maneuver to get their console onto store shelves in America as a toy for children. Sure, adults were playing video games alongside children during this time, just like they were in the arcade days of Space Invaders, but when the novelty of video games began to wear off once again, the main audience left playing video games were the ones it was continually being marketed toward, thus cementing video games as a child's plaything. A waste of time. And this cycle almost seemed doomed to repeat itself from the start. It seems like everyone, including major news outlets, want a piece of the action when a hit new console or game arrives, but as soon as the novelty wears off, everyone except the gaming community stops talking about it. But if video games being treated as just a toy was the only issue here, they would have already bounced back from this negative social status just like TVs did shortly after they first became affordable. That's right, even owning a TV had a stigma attached to it, and for perspective,
it turns out that's basically been our question around TV since the beginning. First invented in 1927 by Philo Taylor Farnsworth, it was considered a rich man's toy. That's interesting. In the early 1930s and 40s, though many wealthy modernists thought it déclassé, I haven't heard that word before, to watch a TV or to have a TV or to watch it. Dr. Spiegel says, but by the end of the 40s, when 2% of American families owned one, they were already all about hiding it.
It took less than 20 years for it to be
I'm not about
dropped
to read that word here.
as the video game crash happened 40 years ago, and it still hasn't been dropped. So yeah, there's something else going on here, because in addition to this, if you haven't noticed, there's this little thing called the internet that you're using right now, where billions of people interact with each other on a day-to-day basis. If people really wanted to, they could find a way to inform themselves about gaming news, but they don't. Sure, we're creatures of habit, so we tend to get comfortable doing or watching a lot of the same things, but there are also a lot of people who really like change.
He's showing a lot of Animal Crossing in this video, a lot of Animal Crossing clips. He must be an Animal Crossing player.
I would know because my wife is one of those people. She's dabbled in games here and there, and while she's not an avid gamer who's obsessed with it like I am, she still has a lot of fun playing games and even recognizes them as a form of art. Yet I hardly ever tell her the latest gaming news because I know she's not super interested in it for the most part.
You don't tell your wife about Spawncast?
Interested in it for the most part. Except that one time she got mad at me for not updating her on the latest Nintendo Direct because they announced Switch Sports. I mean, how the hell was I supposed to know she was interested in? In case it wasn't clear, my wife is the most supporting person in the world and is 100% on board with my passion for video games, and she'll even tolerate my fangirling while watching a Nintendo Direct with me from time to time. But my point is, her interests for the most part lie elsewhere. Just like many others, she's at a point in her life where she knows what she likes and what she doesn't.
All right, y'all, I'm going to keep it real with you. This parka is super comfortable, but this parka, while drinking this coffee from this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles mug, is hot, okay? Ooh, that's better. Ooh, thank you, Jesus.
She couldn't care less about playing Super Smash Bros., for example. Probably because she sucks at it, but that's similar to how my dumbass sucks at sports, which is why I don't really like playing them. But this is because it's natural to not want to do things you're no good at because it's not fun. Video games are very hard to get good at, and they carry a very big intimidation factor. Not only do you have way too many sweats frothing at the mouth to rise to the top of the leaderboards on Overwatch, but you also have incredibly complex games that some people just get overwhelmed at the idea of and never give it a shot. Not to mention there are those who are simply fearful of the addictive nature of games. There are also way too many games to choose from these days that range from something as simple as jumping on enemies to figuring out the perfect combination of items, weapons, abilities, and even strategies needed to bring down the ultimate Giga Chad of a boss. Even the games that we longtime gamers consider casual may not be as easy for some people to get into as we think. The way we engage with a game is very different from the way we engage with other forms of media. You made your first me look as much like you as possible because you are that me. It becomes an extension of yourself to live through in a digital world. In his book, Games Agency as Art, philosopher C.T.
Y'all ever read that? I haven't. Looks dope though. Games Agency as Art.
Wen claims that the motivation behind gameplay is an inversion of how motivation for most other things operate. You don't do your taxes because it's fun, you do your taxes so you don't end up like Scott. On the other hand, you don't play Deltarune or Hollow Knight to check them off a list, you do it for the journey.
I do it for both. I do it for both. I do it to also check it off a list of my backlog.
Okay, maybe we kind of do play them to check them off a list. Compare all of that to something like movies, which are by nature
I have not seen this.
Experiences. Minigames not only take far more time than movies to play through, but have expanded far beyond linear experiences.
Yo, some games are way too long. Like way too long. Like for real. Unless it's a game that I'm trying to get compelled in that has like a game that doesn't have the ending where I can just play it for the rest of my life or something like that. Like some of these games way too long. Maybe people are just trying to get their money's worth. Let me know in the comments. Do you prefer short games or long games or like somewhere in between? Because being 38 and having so many games that I want to finish, like some of these games are just too long. I'm sorry.
Movies only require you to stare at a screen and literally nothing else. You can even just have it on in the background. Video games often require many components such as your reflexes, hand-eye coordination, strategy, skill, experience, patience, and in most cases, your undivided attention. And I haven't even touched on the fact that music, a whole other industry, is merely an ingredient, albeit an absolutely essential one, in both movies and video games. I can just listen to my favorite song on the way to work, whereas sometimes I have to contemplate whether it's worth it to boot up my save file on Tears of the Kingdom, or whether I should just wait until I have a larger chunk of time to play. Playing a video game for someone not familiar with them can quite literally be a lot of work, because as Professor Wen puts it, those who play games play them for the struggle. The reason
Those who play games play them for the struggle. I would have to have more context of what that means. I understand somewhat. It has to have a healthy balance, right? A game can't be too easy or it's too boring. But also, sometimes you don't want a game to be too hard because it might be too hard. Unless you're like, you know, a masochist, you know, and you like just only your favorite types of games are Souls games. Sometimes it's okay to just play a game on normal mode. Sometimes it's okay to just play a game on easy mode. Don't tell anybody I said that, okay?
The reason I couldn't find many videos of people bashing video games for the opening of this video is partially because people who say things like that on the internet will be harassed and no one wants that, but also because a lot of people actually don't feel that way. They simply don't play video games for a multitude of reasons, and that's okay. I'm willing to bet that the reason gamers seem to be segregated off from the rest of YouTube is because gaming is so different and not as widely appealing to a general audience. The reason game companies can't let games speak for themselves is because, unlike movies, you have to play a game to know whether it's good or not. That and traditional celebrities bring a wider audience. So while I initially considered the possibility of older generations being the culprit here, I don't think they deserve as much of the blame as we give them. This sentiment spans generations, and it's why simply covering video games in mainstream news won't suddenly make games a social norm so long as there are people of all ages who simply don't have a desire to play them. In fact, I might go as far as to say that I think it's kind of too late for video games to be covered in mainstream media anyway, because the gap in knowledge about games between gamers and non-gamers has gotten too big. So even if a mainstream news publication hired a gaming expert to report on games, at least a little less than half the American population just wouldn't get it. And that's not...
And really, what gamers are sitting up there just watching Fox News? Like, if I want to hear about games, I'm most likely going to a YouTube channel, right? Am I the only one? I'm going to like Happy Console Gamer or Wolf Den or somebody like that, you know? I'm not going to Fox News.
The countless people who play video games casually while not caring about video game coverage, such as my wife. Wait, hold up. Am I saying that everyone in the US has to be playing video games for it to be considered a normalized hobby? That's exactly what I'm saying. Seriously, can you think of anyone you know who doesn't watch things on a screen, whether that be movies, TV, or even YouTube or TikTok? Video is literally ingrained in our society. Video games? Not so much. This applies to music even more so. Music is something that's not only ingrained in American society, but in the human race itself. It is quite literally universal. So how do we get...
Music is one thing on this earth that was here before this earth in heaven, and it'll be here after this earth.
Everyone to play video games. Well, we kind of can't. Sure, we can show people the value of games all we want, and we can even let them try out a game or two they might like, but the reality is, there will always be people who don't want to play games for whatever.
Deadpool actor Ryan Reynolds considers video games a waste of time. But is it a waste of time watching your movies? You know what I'm saying? Like,
the reality is, there will always be people who don't want to play games for whatever reason. And frankly, some people, especially those who have an addictive personality, might benefit from never playing video games. And that's okay. I don't know about you, but I want games to stay out of the mainstream news and out of the hands of those corporate fools who just want to exploit our nostalgia to make a quick buck. I mean, they're already doing that without it being a social norm. I think I agree with Lindbergh in that maybe there's a benefit to gaming being overlooked. Look, I've come to terms with the idea of gaming being something that not everybody understands the appeal of. I want to help spread that awareness, sure, but I'm okay with where games are at. At least in terms of social status. I think it would be better to let the actual gamers on YouTube like Scott the Woz, Spawnwave, or even Daryl Talks Games continue to handle the game coverage, because here's the thing. Gamers are already socially accepted.
Yo, okay, so, I was like, if I want to know video game news, I'm going to go to YouTube. What if, like, Spawnwave gave his same segment but on a Fox News, right? How do we feel about that? How do you guys feel about that?
Among other gamers. Who cares if the rest of the world understands games? Look, maybe I'm wrong and one day we wake up and everyone is playing games, but other than our insecurities, what would that really change? Would it positively affect anything in the video game industry other than profits, or would it lead to more corporate greed? Only time will tell. So, what do we make of all this? I just spent the last 14 or so minutes telling you how big of an issue all of this is, yet the conclusion I came to is that it's no big deal, because in reality, it's not. Does that change the way I or even you might feel about it? Probably not, but I think the way we tend to approach situations like this is usually bass-ackwards. You see, what started out as a simple question blossomed into something that caused me to do a little self-searching. And while I quite frankly obsessed over it a little too much, I think I came to a conclusion that gave me some closure on the matter. Instead of focusing on how we can get
this dude loves Animal Crossing,
others to like playing or even respecting video games, I think we should instead take a good look in the mirror and ask ourselves how we would feel.
Which, I mean, a lot of people love Animal Crossing, right? I don't like Animal Crossing. I think I might do a video about it, but I don't know. Do you like Animal Crossing? Let me know in the comments. Chances are you probably do, because it seems like it's like universally adored game. I didn't like start playing it during the pandemic or anything like that, like how a lot of people did. It's the game's neither here nor there. But this dude has had like 75 Animal Crossing clips.
If we were on the other side of this. At the end of the day, what we do is our choice. So let's be more understanding of the fact that video games are simply not for everyone, no matter how many games they may try. Let's stop gatekeeping and instead embrace the fact that different sections of the gaming community are more alike than not, instead of dividing ourselves over stupid console wars. Because the only people we're hurting by doing those things are ourselves.
Yeah, see, he raises a good point, because let's say somebody wanted to get into gaming, people gatekeep, and that is like some straight loser behavior, right? You might want to get into gaming, so you decide that you want to get a console, but then you yeah, PC gamers who are like crapping on console gamers, or, you know, people who say if you play retro games, if you emulate, then that's whack. You have to have the original hardware. So, but if you have the original hardware, you have to have a CRT television. Like, it's just so much. Dude, person just wants to play games. Like, get off their back.
It just shows those outside the gaming community that the only thing they're missing out on are fanboys and fangirls fighting amongst each other over corporations who only care about our money in the first place. But I think the most important thing we can do is impact the next generation by showing them the value not only in the game, but in the gamer too. Then, who knows? In time, maybe gamers can be cool. Thanks for watching.
So, gamers are cool. And I once had a friend of mine tell me that God allows video games to show how cool he is, you know? Gaming is cool. So some of my thoughts, and that he didn't really touch on, I think the two main groups that I hear say, or who I hear diss gaming, is the two main groups that I typically hear dissing gaming are like hustle bros, you know, who are just about this culture of you have to work. Leisure time is a waste of time. And the hobby they typically pick on the most is gaming. He didn't touch on that. I think that that's super whack because, like, let's say that somebody, I'm not into sports, right? I like boxing and I like MMA stuff, but as far as football, basketball, I don't really tune in much, except for like highlights. But nobody ever talks about those hobbies, you know? Video games just what always gets dissed. The other group I hear talking about gaming is women sometimes, you know, and I think it's really just because they don't really understand what the hobby is. Now, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of girl gamers, you know, and there are a lot of people who are absolutely fine with their significant other or males gaming. Like my wife does not care that I game, you know, but when I see a lot of these podcasts, you know, it's usually girls saying, like it showed the one clip of the girl saying that, you know, gaming is a waste of time or whatnot. I think that people just don't understand gaming, you know. But yeah, those are my thoughts, you guys, and thank you for tuning in. Yo, check it out. I'm trying to get to my first 1,000 subscribers, okay? Please help me on this journey. But yeah, yo, salutations to the nations. Make sure you hit that like and hit that ding, ding, ding. Peace. I want to add this before I get people going crazy in my comments about my last statement regarding the women that I see online having a problem with video games. I am specifically talking about the women that I see online talking about video games. Okay. I'm not, well, it's, you know, saying that they hate video games. I am not in any way, shape, or form saying all women or making broad generalizations. One of my biggest pet peeves are blanket statements. I know there are many female gamers. My daughter, she loves video games. And yeah, I just want to clear that up so that there's no confusion. I am only saying the people that I hear talk about games online are women in these podcasts talking about, you know, what's attractive or unattractive when it comes to dating men and hustle bro culture. Okay. So just want to clear that up. Once again, salutations to the nations. Make sure you hit that ding, ding, ding. You know what I'm saying?
Angel Knot.